Hello and welcome to Greenbytes Wednesdays. Greenbytes Wednesdays is a podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations and steer consciousness when it comes to understanding the impact of our digital footprint across Nigeria's technology ecosystem. We hope that with this advanced knowledge, we can introduce you to some tools, trends, and best practices that can enhance your knowledge about digital sustainability. Are you curious about climate change? Are you a tech enthusiast or a climate entrepreneur? Come on board and learn on this episode as we get on with every conversation of the Greenbytes Wednesday podcast series. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, funded by the UK government through the Digital Access Program. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote and I am glad to be your host. Welcome on board. Hello and welcome to Greenbytes Wednesday. Greenbytes Wednesday is a podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations and we hope that these conversations can birth some reflective consciousness within you, the listener, especially as it concerns the impact of our digital footprints, open you up to world of knowledge when it comes to Nigeria's technology ecosystem, and present to you some advanced knowledge, tools, and trends when it comes to digital sustainability. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Area I under its Scale Initiative, and that initiative is funded by the UK government through the Digital Access Program. Thank you for taking your time to listen to this episode. Feel free to check out other episodes that we have. And it doesn't matter if you're just curious about climate change, you'll be a tech enthusiast, or just a climate entrepreneur, or someone who just wants to learn about climate change. Welcome on board. Get a seat, call your friends, share with your network, and let's get on with today's conversation. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote, and it's a pleasure to be your host today. On this podcast, we have sort of looked at different things from energy to environment to digital space to digital well-being, smart technologies. Think of it as wide as you can. We definitely covered it on Greenbytes Wednesday. Check out the different episodes. But today we sort of want to point out some of the, when I was growing up, we had these things we called, what was it called now? Key points or so. So when we have these very big textbooks and it's very difficult to understand, then we have the very small important thing in a very pocket-sized booklet. And so think of today's episode as that kind of, outlook. As we look at Nigeria's digital carbon footprint, what are some data, what are some facts, what are some figures that you should know, that you should keep in mind, or that you can make reference to, especially as you try to combine, your digital life with your commitment to our shared planet. So today's episode is Nigeria's digital carbon footprint, data, facts, and figures. My guest today is Charles Asiegbu. Did I pronounce about Asiegbu?
Yes, you did.
Ray. Welcome to the show, Mr. Charles Asiegbu.
Thank you very much.
Right. Charles is a seasoned policy expert. He's a researcher and a program manager, also a trainer and a public policy advisor. For over 8 years, he's gathered lots of experience in driving informed decision making and trying to make, very complex policy, or trying to make the very complex climate policies environment to be simple, and he communicates this. I met up with Charles a few months ago where he made this presentation around, it was a bit around gender and environment and quite a very rich conversation. So when I saw him on the guest slate, and yes, it was really lovely to sit up close to him and learn from him. And I have no doubt that you definitely learn a lot on this episode of Greenbytes Wednesdays. So Charles, how would you like to introduce yourself? Let's start for that. Yes, maybe I missed something.
Just the policy analyst.
Sorry.
Yeah, but I'm interested in climate, environment, energy, and local those. I'm actually multi-sector out in my approach. But these are some of the areas I have done some really nice working.
Well, thank you very much, and it's such a pleasure to have you. Welcome again here. So the truth is, as Nigeria's technology landscape evolves over the years, we have opportunities, but we also have challenges that we're faced with. And one of the pressing concerns is around, carbon footprints. What with all of these digital activities, with new unicorns being born, with very exciting news happening with technological landscape, we also have to think about, hey, what does this mean for our planet? What does this mean for our future, our shared future? And this has been very underexplored. If we have to be very real about it. So, pretty much, we just want to get an overview of some facts, some figures, some data that people should keep in mind when they think around Nigeria's digital and carbon footprint. So, off your mind, or sort of what comes to mind, what do you think should be one key thing that people should know when to try to understand Nigeria's digital carbon footprint, or that sector as it is?
Okay, so I think generally it is a dry subject that is, something we should start with. In this part of the world, it is really talked about. Except for dimensions like scale and several others. But, in the broader sense, it's good to understand it in two ways. For carbon emissions or footprints, there are natural carbon emissions, and then there is also the human-induced. And, natural, you talk about volcanic eruptions, animal and human, and, animal decomposition, and so many others. But for human-induced, it's fossil fuel, there's now digital carbon footprints, digital emission, and so many others. So it is important to underscore that even, with that dryness, when you narrow it down to digital carbon emissions, this is drier in that sense. Because people always talk about fossil fuel, deforestation, and all of that, and it's, it's impacting on our environment, our atmosphere. But for digital, emissions, I think, worldwide, it's about, below 4%, in terms of the contribution for emission. And then in Nigeria, according to a report I read, it's about 34, it contributes about 34% of emissions. And that is why it's important to have that conversation in Nigeria, because, yes.
Let me jump in there. So you mean the digital landscape in Nigeria accounts for about 34% by emissions, if you look at it carefully?
Yes, it does. It does. And 34% is because, we also have data issues. Perhaps if we had stronger systems in place to calculate these emissions, we may be higher. For a good example is something to really understand. So globally, there are about over 5 billion internet users, and and then there's projections that it's causing to increase. Nigeria takes a very large chunk of that percentage. We have a lot of internet users today, especially in the urban areas, and it is projected that as people continue to use, because loosely defined, digital emissions are caused by online activity or the usage of the internet. So when, with the way it is going, with the, call and advocacy for, even of rural areas to catch up, advocates for them to catch up with some of these innovation.
Just do that penetration.
Yeah, so that drive means that a lot of people will now be using the internet, and it means that, emissions would be at a very high, frequency. So that is why this conversation is important, because Nigeria is, in Africa, because we are also, using demography, we are also the largest, in population. So it means you're also going to have a big issue as a people if this is not checked.
Yeah. So let me come in there. We are indeed the largest, country when it comes to population-wise on the African continent. And our population, the figure is around 200 and some stretch it to as much as 240 million people. But we know we are above 200 million people. And very recently, the Nigerian National Bureau of Statistics shared that there are over 311 million users of telephones. So 311 million accounts were really active over the year, like in 2024, the 2024 report. So that tells you, if you admit, you probably have 2 SIM cards and nearly Some people have false SIM cards. So it tells you how much interaction Nigeria as a country puts when it comes to engaging with digital. But if I sort of piggyback a little bit, Billy, I should say, the first time that I get someone to share with me, statistically, what components of greenhouse emissions, GHG as we call it, can be approached to the tech sector. And if you look at it in the Nigerian context, we have the indices, the National Unity Retirement Contributions. It used to be 5 of them until 2021, where it was updated and it became 7 sectors. Tech is not, on the list. You have agriculture and land use, APODU, agriculture, forestry and land use, other land use. We have oil and gas, we have power, we have agriculture, we have transportation. The last two that we added were waste and water. Yeah. So it's interesting to see that for a sector that in some way we can say accounts for over 30%, perhaps you should include it in the new revision of the indices.
Yes, and that's why I said it's tried in the sense that even the policy side of things, there is no representation or conversation as to how this ecosystem is also contributing significantly to our emission.
I don't want to ask the question of how can we then make that happen. Let's sort of stay within the framework of this data because are facts that So away from that, which other fact do you think stands out, or what other figures would you say stands out in our understanding of Nigeria's digital landscape?
Okay, so there are very low levels of either research or data in that area in Nigeria, and that is why even some of the figures we are seeing online, we are taking them by future. Some people have been really do not harm. Maybe we haven't got to that awareness level, or even the required facilities to conduct some of the calculations that is required to gain real insight or into what is going on. A good example is how AI models can be used to can analyze satellite images to capture some of these emissions. That kind of organization you're not here in Nigeria, and then so when the way you talk about data facts in the digital emissions conversation, it is very limited, and that is why I'm giving you the ones that I have seen, and I did a bit of vetting to say, okay, these are good. When you talk about MBS today has a lot of controversy, the figures they turn out. And that's why I was also skeptical to say it's 300 million. So why is it 300 million? Is it just mobile phone? There's also laptop, there's iPad, there's so many other devices. So in as much as we understand the importance of data, it's also important to ensure that there's a lot of vetting process that goes into it, and we're also very careful on how we throw out data so that we don't get this made up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Charles. So pretty much what I hear you say is that if we really will make progress in our understanding of Nigeria's digital carbon footprint, conversations like this that we have should open up the floor for improved ways of data collection, should also maybe stress to different parties, different partners, the importance for us to think of the right set of data as we approach this subject of sustainability. Perhaps my next question to you will be, as a researcher, what challenges do you think you are faced with when you try to engage with data in Nigeria's digital carbon space?
Okay, it can be in two parts. The generic, which is the general challenges people face in collecting data in Nigeria, and then also the specific. Generic in the sense that data is not easily accessible in Nigeria. For example, if you walk up to a government ministry to collect some form of information, you have to shout at the top of a voice that, oh, there's something that is like a freedom of information before they even. So the government itself, for example, does not pay attention to data collection or saving data. A good example is years ago when I used to manage the violent conflict database. I relied on news sources to extract that. So I was manually extracting. So they say someone was shot a hijabi, for example. I'll carry that report I put on the spreadsheet. That's how the unit will be over 4,000. So And what we're trying to do was to get the government to know that something like this is ongoing, because we also have plans to deploy people who will be on ground across the country to also help us triangulate all that deal. And if they even see something in the university, they pick it. Yeah, but it was difficult because the government did not find it interesting. So the government doesn't keep records or rarely pays attention to the ones they are keeping. And that is like one problem. For the generic also, there's the issue of funding. So as a researcher, if you want to go into this kind of research, there are a lot of tools out there that are important. There are accounting calculators. I spoke about AI models. So if you want to really go into the details of calculating or researching about digital emissions, it is cost effective. It's very expensive, and we do not have the required adequate funding to able search on Google or any other platform on Edge will give you an idea of what is going on. There are rarely, conversations around the situation in Nigeria as regards to digital emissions. And that is quite a challenging limitation today. It is generic, it is specific, it is a problem. Any research you want to do requires funding. People are not really, or organizations do not really invest in research and development, or like other crimes. So that's a big challenge.
I see. Very. So I really want to talk about AI. You mentioned it a few times, but I also know on one of the other episodes we delved into the role of AI in advancing digital sustainability. Feel free to check it out if you haven't. And maybe we can touch a little bit about it later. But if I take it back a little bit, where you talked about the National Bureau of Statistics and how, we have to quote your word, take it with a pinch of salt, the figures we get from them. But we also have figures from, for example, we have the Global US Monitor, we have some other World Data Facts, for example. You probably know more of these platforms than I do. And some of them put out figures or data that are really, really scary. For example, it was said that Nigeria in 2022 alone generated about 500 metric tons of e-waste. Just e-waste. Scary. And that made us like the highest in West Africa and the third highest on the continent. I also was very scared, I must say, when I read that over 68,000 phones were produced every hour. Over 68,000 phones were produced every hour. And as if that is not enough, over 13 million phones are thrown away every day. And you imagine that if you multiply that by 365 days, you're not quite beyond phone being thrown away. So my question to you is, how do we engage with this data? It's one thing to just, read it up and be startled by it, work with it, be engaged with it. But it's also another thing to read it up and dismiss it and feel, this is not possible. Imagine 30 million phones being thrown away every day. You'd be like, I want to this cost. So my question is, how should we engage with, facts, data, figures that we sort of engage or that comes our way when we sort of trying to open up ourselves to new world of knowledge in areas digital?
Yeah, so I spoke about, connecting data is a bit here today, is a problem. But another thing I didn't talk about is dissemination as well. And what do you mean by dissemination? Dissemination, dissemination, yes, sharing needs. So we have a snag. A lot of people, a lot of research efforts do not really, incorporate the communications component of it. So people do not pay attention to it, why it is important to communicate it. And that's why I had a conversation with you earlier, that a lot of some people who are able to manage to commit resources, as organizations or individuals to conduct research, they fail to say, okay, this is how we want to share it. How many radio stations? Okay, this is our target audience. How many radio stations we may need to hit? How long will they run the programs? How long will they, share the ideas or findings? And then if it is social media, if you want to do the traditional media, what platforms can we leverage? Are there key persons that speak to this data or push it out there, and then people are able to absorb the information, right? So this is some of the key issues we face. So you can even, invest some resources in research and it dies there. You're not able to see it. You go online, searching engine optimization, you're searching and you're not able to see for so many reasons, because people do not pay attention to the fact that this research is supposed to be convenient. People are supposed to be, especially policymakers. I've done researches in the past where I have worked on a main report of about 100 pages or whatever, and then I've come up with like 3 pages, a 3-page fact sheet, right? That is, also me being sensible or being realistic. And look, is for this bulk research for people who want in depth, but there are people who may see a figure and they will think about it, and then they are saying, okay, we need to take a step in the direction. This is too much, right? So the e-waste you talked about is a conversation we're not having. Even if you're having it in Nigeria, it is at the minimal level, and if you do not get funding from outsiders, we're not doing it. I say what's happening when you say that all of that. So everybody running your task that when we do not have that support externally, then internally we are due. So I like how you used e-waste to give, that example. It is across board. Every other area of research, health, transportation, every other area of research has that lack. So beyond the fact that we don't get enough funding, there's another problem of being able to, first of all, understand that, we need to push this out and then making efforts to pushing it out.
Then take it up from there, pushing it out. I did a little bit of research, though it's around climate skepticism, most of the work I do, maybe a bit around blue economy. But sometimes I almost go crazy when I see that research in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Namibia, in Rwanda, everything by quote unquote non-Africans. And it makes me think, where are the researchers like you? Perhaps it's a thing about visibility, perhaps it's a thing of the platforms that it goes on. What really happens to having, the people that have been affected, having the skilled among them to go in, make findings, document, and disseminate?
Yeah, I think what the question should be, why are we not getting the funding required to do it, or why? Because most of those people you're seeing that are not Africans are mostly funded externally. So it's the best thing to say, oh, I read this person's report overseas, or I'm based overseas and I'm the funder, and I've seen this person's work ethic. I know he's very strong with methodologies and he's able to deploy to the field, to collect information. So therefore, what's the point? He has some experience researching on Africa. Why not just give it the resources to do it? Why there's no point going to Nigeria to come and lead for Charles? Do you understand? So another key question I'll ask is, how many people do you know in Nigeria, like beyond writing school projects, BSc, MSc, that actually take research as a role or something they're interested in doing long term? There are very few of us, or the ones that are doing it are also doing fashion design. So we have a long list of problems, and I don't want to really delve into them, but the question should be, why is it that, internally, the government or even internal stakeholders not really paying attention to research? Why don't we also promote our own out there? When I was reading to, for this interview, I saw where, the big tech companies, Amazon, YouTube, all of those guys, they have, for digital, editions, they have yearly reports that they specifically turn out to say, okay, this is what we emitted this year, this is how we're trying to manage this situation, how we're cutting that, these are our measures. Do you know any big, you don't have big tech in Nigeria, but do you know any big company or corporation that, is really invested in that kind of report, or even understands the impact? There are very few of them. There are little to nothing that exist. So, some of these conversations have not gotten to the advanced stage. We are still dealing with, ephemeral issues, religion, politics, but the key issues that will impact on our future tomorrow is, way below the chain. And that is why when you say, people, we are not even having a conversation, why would they come to us? It's just the only saving grace we have today is because some of us are able to also leverage, the internet very, even though we know, there's the bad side of it. They call it the dark side of data. So we know what, we understand that it's also a problem, but we're leveraging it to connect, using LinkedIn to connect to people, tell them about what we do, or we send something, they reach out to me. It's 2 days ago, I was interviewed by AFP or the research I did in 2023. As I was doing that, one of our, stuff from BBC in England. They were ever asking them I was in UK. I said no, in Nigeria. They said okay. And then send me an email. So that is the only way where people are able to feel see what we are doing.
Charles, you talking about the gap side of data. What does that mean?
Yeah, this is like this digital, what's it called, emissions we are talking about, because, we're also leveraging data to do a lot of the work we are doing today, cloud savings, a lot of all those things. The dark side of it is that emissions are ongoing, cyber bullying is ongoing, cyber security issues, misinformation. So all of those things are,
all better thing. Yeah. I also say this quite a number of times, and people are shocked when I say that if you sit, in your car in the bedroom and you're just streaming a platform like a movie streaming platform, for example, Netflix, and you do that for 1 hour, the figure says that it's about the same emission as if you're driving a car out by 25 minutes, and they're like, what? That's crazy. I give you another one. I was speaking with a guest on one of the other episodes, and he said, for every 100 words you put on large language models, AI platforms like ChatGPT, for example, you are consuming 20 gallons of water for every 100 just to cool the system. And then so probably you said dark cyber data that you're talking about. Yeah, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I should also go on to say, hey, check us on other platforms apart from where you're still be right. Probably the data. Also share with your network, share with your parents. Particularly if you've learned something new, as I continue the conversation with. I call you Dr. Charles. So what's your viewer? Thank you for staying with us. This is Greenbytes Wednesday, podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations, and we do hope that this conversation is stir within you some reflective consciousness, particularly as it concerns your impact or the impact of the digital footprint. And that it also opens you up to a world of knowledge when it comes to Nigeria's tech ecosystem, or that probably you're learning, some new tools, trends when it comes to the digital sustainability as a whole. My guest today has been Charles Asiegbu. We've been speaking a lot around data, facts, and figures when it comes to Nigeria's digital space or digital carbon space. I should say that this podcast is brought to you by Area I under its SCALE initiative, and SCALE is Smart Climate Awareness Learning and Empowerment Initiative funded by the UK government through the Digital Access Program. Feel free to check out the podcast wherever you find podcasts, from YouTube to Spotify to Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, wherever it is you find the podcast. And it's such a pleasure to bring you this and many more episodes. Back to Charles. Maybe we can then talk about some best practices. We've sort of, opened up to ourselves as Nigerians about some of the challenges, but we must acknowledge that there are probably some best practices out there that makes it easy for countries to, engage with data, collate fact, or use these figures to improve their digital or sustainability engagement. So what are some best practices that folks demand?
Yeah, I already kind of mentioned them in brief. Some tech companies put out these reports, and they, beautiful resource for researchers, for example. So, when you're conducting a desk research, for example, you're able to look at what they are saying, okay, and then maybe someone like me even uses keyword analysis table on Excel to do my analysis. I could say, okay, this is what Amazon is releasing, this is what YouTube is releasing. And then I can pivot around a chart to say, okay, across ABC and this is the person that releases the most. And then we can use that as a policy, you can create a policy recommendation and say, okay, there's a need for government to be more light on what YouTube will say, or and based on the fact that they are doing more, or if there's a set target, you should do beyond this target and they're doing over, or something like that. So you're able to use data already. But another way to look at it is some governments are already, in terms of best practices, already also taking the forefront to go ahead to release reports, Greenbytes reports. In the EU, there's what they call the EU digital product passports. Okay. Yes, that's like a tool that he will use to disseminate some of the information. So I think on the policy side of things for a country like Nigeria is good to, because you already said it in the list of emissions. Digital emission is not there. They listed everywhere that's oil and gas and mineral. And this sector is back there, even though it is contributing significantly. So it's first of all for the government to accept or understand that this is an issue, and then begin to create policies that will kind of regulate or start tracking. There's what they call carbon accounting tool and so many other tools that can be utilized, the interim to capture it. In a country like Estonia, I recall that I think they have like a program where companies who are able to track their gas offer rate get some form of tax break, or I think Estonia, all of those countries. So it is important for the government to also incentivize the process, introduce policies, scale it, escalate it for people to understand the impact, especially in businesses or tech. Businesses in the tech sector, and then individuals who are massively invested in it, and then find ways where, as you're pushing out the information, you're also telling them that, okay, the government is able to do this and this for you, so that it's something that is balanced. You're using it, and then you also recognize the impact or the dark side of the effect.
So Charles, if you had to reflect a little bit on how you came into this space of engaging with data, and you could use this to sort of nudge other people to become more participative in, monitoring, collecting data, what will be your reflection?
Yes, so I am pro data. I have been pro data since I started tracking conflicts, running conflicts, and then working on so many other projects that required me to show strength in data. So some of the projects I'm involved in, and I was able to show that, okay, I'm able to source for information, kind of gave me an edge. Even while bidding for opportunities, and I'm able to show that, I leverage data at every point we can, and even our figures. It's very important. But if you're someone who has really delved into data, you're also going to be very careful how you teach data. The source is important. Yesterday, I was working on a fact sheet on tobacco and cancer. I was working on the Nexus, and then I saw a very interesting data, very, very interesting. It had a breakdown of, how the different types of cancer that is caused by tobacco in Nigeria. In fact, it was funded by an international agency. I'll be in a collaboration with Nigeria's Ministry of Health, and then it showed the region of Southeast, Southwest that had the highest number of tobacco usage. But that data was 2012. And so those are some of the. So I think detail is very important. You need to also know that at the end of the day, you don't want to just throw out data, but you want to ensure that you're paying attention to the ethics, you're respecting it, you're looking for sources. There's a data I'll see on, I don't want to call names, but casual blogs. I know who pick it up. I cannot reference it. So it has to be also something, because so if you have that sense of rigor, you want to get validity and something, you can do. There's no perfect research at all. There's one overlap route. All models are wrong, but some can be useful. So we are doing all of this, to ensure that our society the current data. So if you know that this is the impact and the outcome, that can also drive you. But in terms of, it's good to talk about some of the good things that can come up, from researching some of, the good thing about it is that, become knowledgeable about a specific field. That if you're also multi-sector, are able to, be knowledgeable about some of the issues that are going on. And then if you're called to a conversation, you're able to make use of the to that is data driven. And then if there are opportunities for you to jump on.
Let me jump in here and say that, how then do you weigh what you want to use? You said there are, figures you will see on platforms, and you say, no.
Yes.
So how do you weigh this is good, this is not.
Yes, so it has to be from a credible, then
I was credible.
yes, credible in the sense that an organization that has done impactful work in that area for a very long period of time. I'll go for an example.
No. Let's say, so we had this conversation about not so many Nigerian organizations are in this space. So does credible means having to, bank on, foreign guys because they've been in this case.
So that actually for you can bank on that area. Yeah, because it's doing work in this area. I'm able to say, okay, do you guys even have data? And that's why I feel this is so important. I can say, okay, let me visit their office. If I see something that I feel I didn't know information, I don't visit your office. Are there resources that you can need me to use and make the work better? So that's the way to go about it. So you should be looking for those kind of.
Also, apart from credibility models,
credibility is also your ability to be smart sometimes about it. So you can see three.
There's an instinctive way of saying, nah.
Yeah, so it's not even like if you're reporting, if you're writing, and there's 3-4 sets of data, someone is saying 30, someone is 32, someone is 34. You can say it is less than, according to reports, it's less than 34 or less than 40, or say according to several is using the range of this and that. It's your ability to also communicate and then put sources. Okay, if you said these are the people, are you able to say this is where you got the information from? So that's also your ability to push things around. That's your outward.
I know I said we had another episode where we'll talk about AI, but I want to get for you. Maybe I should sort of reel out some figures at one of the AI platforms. Hey, tell me some very, punchy, fat figures when it comes to Nigeria's digital space. And I'm just going to read out a few of them, and I want to see, your reactions to them, and we can close that also, with your thoughts around how well can we work with AI, trust AI, or question AI when it comes to the figures and data that we get. For example, it says that 50% of Nigeria's population, which is around 101 million, has internet penetration. Yes or no?
I doubt.
Okay. It said that the country's internet usage has grown by 10% every year for quite a while, and that there's been increased connectivity and broadband access.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay. It says Nigeria is the largest mobile market in Africa, over 200 million mobile phones.
Yeah, I think that works too.
Okay.
Not 200, but something close to it.
Okay. It says that mobile broadband penetration is around 47%, and there's a shift from 2G to 5G in some urban areas.
Yes.
Okay, let's look at the e-commerce component. It says that Nigeria's e-commerce market has been valued as much as $13 billion in 2022 and expected to double by 2025, which is the year we're in.
Double, I'm not sure, but yes.
Okay. It also mentions some key players that are using digital platforms to push, their businesses. Which players do you think will come to your mind, for example?
Probably the banking sector, telecoms, and even what's it called these days is people namely, what do you call it, housing. Okay, there. People in the housing or building or whatever, those guys had the way pushing out the information. It could be radical, losing both influencers and all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it mentions some, e-commerce platforms like Konga or Jumia, so fintech platforms. I've seen money pay over the places. There's remote or fair money, Paystacks and the likes of them. It also refers to the e-naira that's Nigerian, the Central Bank of Nigeria runs.
Now, it has suffered a policy growth.
Okay, maybe just a few other figures. It says that the Nigerian government aims to expand broadband penetration by 70%. We started by just 50% penetration, and there's going to be 70% penetration. How do you react to that?
I necessarily do not react to what the government says, because the government says a lot of things. They have a lot of ambitious policies or visions.
So they not do what they do.
Yes, we'd rather wait and see what happens at the end of it.
Okay. I was saying also, I read that Nigeria is one of 6 out of 9 unicorns on the African continent. That Nigeria And yet it says that Nigeria has the largest startup ecosystem on the African continent, over 300 tech startups. And Lagos is considered to be a Silicon Valley than you are.
Yeah.
Interesting. Great. The last that I will refer to is the fact that it says it sort of informs what the most used social media platform is. What do you think that is?
What's up?
WhatsApp? My Facebook?
Not Instagram. I think WhatsApp.
I'll keep that as a mystery. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to a very arty chat for, sort of opening up to us about the realities that researchers face, telling us about, how to evaluate data, how to engage with data, what not to do with data. We really do appreciate it. Maybe the last question. With AI all over the place, what would be your advice to people who just, feed information and just take it?
So I think relying on AI for data is not smart, because AI is a work in progress. It processes information and uses it to update whatever it sees. And then if you're someone that also leverages AI, you see that sometimes to tell you, I do not have a current feed, but this is it. So that kind of limits it. So people should use AI for, surface conversations or immediate. So sometimes I check AI and I go to Google, and then you see that there's like right? And someone as a researcher, you have to play, I have to, they call it prompt engineering. You have to always pose some questions to give you like a different view of what you already have. So I don't rely on AI that much, except maybe for phrasing or something. But then I use Grammarly, right? But you see that Grammarly, if you update 100% now, come back in 2 days, like the duration of the short, it's also showing that is also limited. That's the way you should be thinking. It is thinking that way. So people should not rely so much on it, but be smart about how they use it to improve on their work. That's all I can say. I'm reading out everything out, like shaking my head. No, don't do it, because I bet you if you go online, if you go and do your proper search, if you go to Google Scholar, you see maybe more credible. And the test of data is also sometimes the methodology. So as someone who is research, if you send me a report by looking at how did you go about collecting this data? So the rigor of your methodology is what matters. AI doesn't tell you how it collects, it just generates, and then it off something. So I think we should be also very careful, but also know that it's something we must use.
Yeah, great. What a place to call it a wrap. Thank you so much once again, Charles Asiegbu, for joining us on Greenbytes Wednesday.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It is indeed our pleasure to have you, Charles Asiegbu. I've been speaking with Charles, a seasoned policy analyst, a researcher, project manager, trainer, and public policy advisor. We've had very interesting but also insightful conversations, particularly as it concerns Nigeria's digital carbon footprint. What are the facts, figures, and data that are out there? How should we engage with it? I cannot thank you enough for your time. Our pleasure indeed. I should say once again that this podcast is brought to you by Area I under the SCALE initiative, and SCALE is Smart Climate Awareness, Learning and Empowerment Initiative. It's funded by the UK government under the Digital Access Program. So to many of you that are curious about climate change, that are equivalent thing or two, and that you share with people within your network, also feel free to follow us on our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, X as it's called now. Check out our courses, check out our website for courses and other forms of content or programs that we put out as an organization, to see that you understand a lot more when it comes to the digital sustainability landscape in Nigeria. I would say, in all of this, find the balance also with your commitment to our shared planet and to people that matter in your life. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote, and I close by thanking Ayo, Ajibola, Neri, wonderful, and everyone that made this possible. Bye for now. Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. This podcast is brought to you by Area I under the SCALE initiative, thanks to funding from the UK government through the Digital Access Program. Have you learned something new? Please share with your network, share with your friends, as I look forward to hosting you on yet another episode of Greenbytes Wednesday next week. Follow us on our social media platforms, check out our courses, test yourself, see how much you know, how much you're learning when it comes to digital and sustainability ecosystem in Nigeria. And I should remind you that as you balance your knowledge of digital ecosystem, also remember to stay committed to a shared and sustainable planet. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote.